Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm your host, Ben Schneider, joined as always by my co-host, Brandon Crossland. Brandon, how's it going tonight? Good to see you again.
Doing good, Ben, and hello, everyone. Just vibing to the intro vibes, and it is another Motor Monday, although I'm not actually drinking out of it today, so it's just for the aesthetics. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing all right. We've got Watkins Glen on the plate, and plenty that came along with that.
Some open wheel action as well. We'll get into that later on in the show. We're going to start with an open segment as we often do, though, and I got the Baja Blast this time because I may get a little animated with my thoughts here, but I'll do my best to keep it reserved. I don't want to go too far up on my soapbox here this evening, but I do have some thoughts.
I don't think the Baja Blast helps with that. If you drink it to keep you from being animated, well, I think it's only going to propel that more further. So.
Yeah, it's probably counterintuitive, but we'll do our best here. I do have I have to say the Cup finish was fantastic. So I've come up with a proposal, and we'll get into that in just a moment because I do think the Xfinity finish was a little bit out there in terms of the insanity as these multi-overtime finishes often are. But before we get into all that, as always, I want to take a moment to thank the people that make this show possible and all of these shows here at the Grid Network, everything that we do. Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, thank you so much for your continued support of us through Patreon. And if you like what you see tonight, if you check out the channel and like what you see on the other shows and our on-track, on-site at-track coverage, that's what we're really trying to build up here for 2025 and beyond. If you want to see more of that, let's see it more commonly in the future here, you can join these fine individuals by supporting us through Patreon, or if you'd either make a one-time donation instead, you can click on the super chat options here if you're watching us on YouTube, or visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below as well. Any amount helps us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet here at the Grid Network. Now, Brandon, like I just mentioned, both races this weekend went into overtime. Martin Truex Jr. in particular on the Cup Series side of things said that he's quite tired of getting pushed around during these crazy overtime finishes, everybody driving through one another. Of course, he has a reputation as one of the cleaner drivers in the series. The Xfinity Series race, however, was even more chaotic and crazy, took multiple overtime attempts. I think it took almost a full hour since the first overtime attempts to get the race finished. Granted, we did have a red flag for a lot of oil that was laid down on the track here. But before I get into my thoughts, I want to give you the chance to tell us what you thought of the wild Cup finish that we saw between Chris Buescher and Shane Van Gisbergen, as well as the Xfinity Series finish where I guess Connor Zilisch pulled a Joey Logano at Nashville. Nobody thought that any of those top three were going to have enough fuel, and yet he not only won and made it across the line, but he did so in dominant fashion.
Yeah, first Connor Zilisch, man, made a dominant statement on the Xfinity field, and it was actually kind of embarrassing for how long it took to get the overtime taken care of, and also, frankly, pretty embarrassing for the rest of the field behind Connor that was swerving out left and right off the track, going three wide around the entire circuit. It was pretty awkward. And of course, yeah, you're fighting for every position. And then seeing Sheldon Creed at the end after it was all said and done, and knowing yet again he is not yet at his win. And yeah, you can't pass under yellow. It's already said and done. Man, the Cup Series race though, that was like you said, that is a definition of overtime working well. Of course, I also rolled my eyes when we went into overtime for the Cup race at Watkins Glen, but I think we were rewarded for it this time just because we have some talent that was there at the front. Chris Buescher and Shane Van Gisbergen, who SVG also a big part of the Xfinity race as well. It's to be expected, but man, the Cup race gave us something really special. And never did I think I would see, this is the most important part to me, never did I think I would see someone be able to pass in the carousel for the win. All the other big moments at Watkins Glen that I can remember anyway, this is without prep, that big moments at Watkins Glen, you might prove me wrong, but they didn't seem to happen in the carousel. A lot were set up in the carousel. It got a guy loose in the carousel, but carousel is historically, from my memory, something that a place on the track where you have to kind of methodically set up your next move that you're going to get on that back straight going into 6 and 7, or maybe you just the after effects of what you already completed on the bus stop. So yeah, that was. It almost didn't seem real. It almost had like a Ross Chastain moment for me. Like, did he really just do that? Like the camera it was doing that, was on the zip line thing through the bus stop, which I think looks incredible. Great job, NBC. Um, but like coming into the carousel, the angle we had was on the tails of the cars, and so it didn't look real for a moment. But man, that was a sweet move, and Chris Buescher finally gets that chip off his shoulder and gets a win on a road course. Nicely done, and for the Cat in the Hat too, getting to celebrate.
Yeah, well, and Lee Diffie mentioned it on the call. Even before what happened, there was shades of Keselowski and Ambrose, of course. Brad
Right?
Keselowski, now part
Yeah.
owner of the RFK car that Chris Buescher was driving, and Buescher doing what Keselowski wasn't able to do, and that was taking the fight to the guy from down under, Marcus Ambrose from Australia, obviously Shane Van Gisbergen from New Zealand, but still very much part of that supercars world. And very rare mistake out of a driver of number 16. Colleague racing / like a lot of Trackhouse influence Chevrolet there. Would have been cool to see that car win. Unfortunately, we're in the playoffs now, so it wouldn't have had an effect on the owners' playoffs and throwing a wrench into that. But still would have been
Had
good
an effect on us, so it would have been a really cool win.
Yeah, would have been great for SVG. And it still was great for SVG. Yeah, a great weekend for him overall. Top fives in both races, and in contention for the win on the Cup side of things. I think you have to say he's probably going to be a playoff lock. He's probably going to win one of these races next year if he drives the way he did yesterday. So we'll keep our eye on that. But I do want to talk about the overtime debate here, because obviously it came up again, and there was one individual who I'm not going to name here, but he and I, if you know, he and I have gone back and forth on this on X/Twitter before, namely after last year's Indy 500. And sent a tweet out with an eye rolling emoji saying sarcastically, "Well, I don't know, guys. I think we should have sacrificed that great finish to end it under caution." And so, I saw that. I didn't respond to the tweet, but I tweeted myself because Charlie Kral tweeted that he likes the idea of unlimited overtime. Said no matter how many tries it takes, we should do our best to try to get something like what we saw on the Cup Series side of things with that incredible finish. And in light of all that, I will acknowledge, and I said on the air here after, I think it was Nashville, whenever we had the quintuple overtime, that couldn't believe Mike Bagley's poll when he put out that, it was like 4%. Somebody that, or people that wanted no overtimes was 4%. People that wanted 4 or more was still 73%, or some ridiculously high number like that. So shows that I'm in the minority, and I'll acknowledge that. So this is my proposal that I'm coming to the table with, and I've proposed it before, but I want to add another element to it this week because of the title of the race. We'll give you one attempt. I'll admit it. What we saw yesterday was absolutely fantastic, and way more entertaining and way more satisfying of a finish than just ending it under caution. But Brandon, you know what the race title was yesterday?
Well, I can help you on that. It was the Go Bowling at the Glen. Oh, you mean the Xfinity race?
The Cup. Well, either one.
Oh,
either one. Was the Xfinity? Well, actually, we can't do it with the Xfinity race.
That would be that would be the Mission 200.
But
so
yes,
200.
But the Cup Series race was the Go Bowling at the Glen.
Sure was.
What race do we have coming up this week? It's Bristol Night race, right?
Mm-hmm. No number attached to it.
No number
Miles
attached
or laps.
And that's that. And listen, I'm sure people are rolling their eyes right now. They're going to say that that's silly on my part. But I'm sorry. I'm a firm believer that words and numbers mean something. Numbers are not arbitrary. You go to the Daytona 500, you plan for a 500-mile race, and when you have overtime after overtime after overtime, and Kyle Busch takes the checkered flag at lap number 500, but he's not the winner, it bothers me on a fundamental level that that's what we do here. We got to take the numbers out of the races if we're going to do this. So, but on a weekend like this, hey, it's the Go Bowling at the Glen. It's a race. You want to have these rules where you have to get a green flag finish? Again, I'd rather see us limited to one attempt, but it doesn't bother me as much this weekend. It's just called the Go Bowling at the Glen.
And those that are radically in favor of overtimes at all costs, they love the Go Bowling at the Glen They love the fact that it
Yeah.
has no number, and they use that as a talking point.
Yeah. And again, Brandon, I don't know if you saw it. I know our colleague here at Grid Network, frequent guest on our shows, Jonathan Field. I said as the Xfinity finish was going on, man, this just feels like a lottery because all these guys, these crew chiefs, they plan to save this much fuel, and now the race keeps getting extended. Nobody knows where it's going to end. And I shouldn't have used that word lottery because lottery implies completely random and no order or anything whatsoever. So poor choice of words on my part. I'm sure I've tweeted that in the past.
Not
so
completely a lottery.
It's a good reminder for me to be a little bit more articulate and careful with my vocabulary here, as somebody that values the definition of words and the meaning of numbers, as I just laid out here during this argument. It's not a lottery, but it is very difficult to predict, and it makes the crew chief's job a lot harder. Overtime itself makes a crew chief's job harder. We saw it. We've seen it plenty of times. Where drivers think they're good on fuel, and then we get an overtime. But when it goes into 3 or 4, as we saw at Nashville, 5 attempts, it completely, drivers are going to start running out of fuel. Because these cars don't have an infinite number of space in their fuel cells, right? Like it makes it, I don't know. Even if we do get a green flag finish at the end, and by the way, thank goodness Connor Zilisch did win this race. He was thoroughly deserving of it. He had to come back from the penalty that sent him to the back of the field and was so fast, so dominant all day long. So it turned out all right, and I can't really complain about that. But it just when it goes on for almost an hour, and I saw IMSA fans on social media saying this, like, imagine if the 6 hours of the Glen turned into the 7 hours of the Glen because they had to get a green flag finish and they couldn't finish it. People look at that and say these are the so-called best stock car drivers in the world. And it takes you an hour to run 2 laps. You can't run 2 green flag laps. So I don't know if that's again. I know it doesn't happen every time. It clearly didn't happen in the Cup race this weekend. They were well enough behaved to give us a good finish there. But I don't know. I feel like you leave the door open for unlimited attempts. You leave the door open for something like what we saw at Nashville this year and what we saw in Xfinity this weekend to happen.
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know if I cut you off there. If you want to follow up on that,
no, I was cutting you off. So I'm glad that you kept going. I was saying in the Cup race, they did not behave themselves beforehand. That's why we were in the overtime situation. But some way they were able to keep it clean, well, enough to where we didn't have to throw a yellow. I think back to William Byron falling onto Brad Keselowski's number 6 machine. That was very scary. Glad he's okay there on that driver's side, of course. But yeah, that the whole combination of things turning into overtime there. I'm still just kind of in the same camp with you, where yes, in a way they are being put in a box to do these sorts of things, but also the rule, I gotta also look at that. The rules are this way from the very beginning of the season. Yes, the fuel cells hold this much, but also they know going in that this is going to be a possibility. And
sure,
they know the probability of it's more possible here, less possible here. They account for that, and they don't blame the system if they are out for the count when it happens. They say, well, we fell on the short end of the stick this time.
Yeah, and that's completely fair as well. The rules are the same for everybody. Everybody has to be able to adapt to it, and whoever ultimately can adapt to it the best is going to come out on top. And again, I think it speaks very highly of Connor Zilisch, not only how dominant he was, but how he was able to save as much fuel as he did. Everything got thrown at him with the penalty early on. Rookie mistake following those 2 cars through the bus stop. I still have no idea what happened there. I can understand Zilich's frustration there. I can understand the confusion, but I don't understand the confusion as to why it was a penalty. But hey, he drove back through the field and outdrove road course legends in this series, such as AJ Allmendinger, legendary drivers such as Shane Van Gisbergen. At 18 years old, we'll get into that more here in just a little bit. It was sensational, and then to save enough fuel on top of that to not have the victory taken away from him with all the insanity of the chaos in overtime. I mean, I can't really complain about the outcome here, but it frustrates me that it takes us so long to finish these races and leaves us with the potential for, the results to get shaken up a bit, and some drivers probably finishing higher than they would have otherwise, and other drivers who have great days and put in great drives that ultimately have nothing to show for it because they had to pit for fuel at the end, or they ran out of fuel at the end here. We saw that, I think, with Ty Gibbs on one of the restarts. So I completely understand the want and desire for a green flag finish. And I am willing to acknowledge I'm in the minority. I am willing to acknowledge that a lot of times we'll do this one attempt and we'll get the job done on the first attempt, and it'll be a great finish, and it'll be replayed for years to come. But it's always bothered me that we advertise a certain distance, we put these numbers in these race names, and then we throw it all out the window at the end because we want to try to maximize the entertainment value, and it wrecks all these strategies and everything. So I think once you get beyond one attempt, it's still a little bit too much for me. I'm still not a huge fan of that. But if you take the race numbers out of names, get creative, go bowling at the Glen. That's got a nice ring to it. Bristol Night Race. I don't think it's that hard for tracks to come up with, race names like that.
Yeah.
I'll give you your one attempt, and we can leave it there. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. That's how the official iRacing official races operate in the three highest levels of NASCAR competition. On there, they have a green, white, checkered finish, and you get so many attempts on the official ones. And I think that works out fine because, trust me, if there was more, the iRating that I race around with, we would find ways to make more and more and more, and it would just go on forever. Yeah, I completely see that. One attempt is great. But yeah, one thing that also bothered me was the changes to the track in order to try to keep them out of the race groove. And it was a complete fail. I mean, it was supposed to upset the car to where they wouldn't want to be out beyond track limits. And I was thinking, great, this is going to be great. Then we get to the race though, and I mean, for the qualifying laps, they were still extending all the way out because I thought, well, okay, well, it's only qualifying. They're not too worried about upsetting their car because they want to get the maximum amount of time cut on it. But no, we come to the race and it's still the same thing we saw last year. That only there's just rumble strips involved, or just the grooved payment, the grooved payment that you would see on like interstate, beside the interstate.
Yeah, that's what they should have done with all the grass they just dug up at Daytona and paved over. They should have just brought the grass over to Watkins Glen and given us natural track limits. If there's a natural deterrent, natural track limit, then the drivers won't go there. But if you pave it and they can carry that speed through the corner, what's the point of even having the rumble strips there or having the white line painted on the track? Whatever is supposed to define track limits. Clearly, track limits aren't enforced here, and that's fine. I think they're certainly over enforced in Formula One and series like that. But yeah, that certainly didn't work as intended there, did it?
Watkins Glen is a beautiful track, and it's one of the few left that are like that naturally built sort of tracks going with the terrain. And it hurts me every time I see them just completely ignore Watkins Glen and kind of make their own track by not using the limits. And yeah, they should put grass there. And look, Watkins Glen is the safest it's ever been. It used to be much dangerous, much more dangerous, and much less well kept. You just look back at any IMSA race in the 80s or 90s and see what kind of shape it was in then. But why can't we stick with track limits? No, there's no penalty for going out, but let's make it where it's grass, where you don't want to do it anyway.
One more point on this, and then we'll move on and give Zilisch his flowers here because he certainly deserves it with both races that he was a part of this weekend. But Seth Eggert on X, when was this? I guess this was during the Xfinity race. The record for most overtimes in a single season is 29 combined across the three at NASCAR National Touring Series in 2023. For NASCAR Xfinity specifically, it's 14 in 2021. Thus far in 2024, we are combined at 26 this year. In the Xfinity Series, we're at 12. So those records were set within the last 3 seasons, and we are on pace to break both of them this season. So I guess what I take away from that tweet, and again, I was paraphrasing there. Maybe I'll link it in the description after I click this if people want to go check Seth's workout. And by the way, follow Seth on X/Twitter as well, because he's full of notes, nuggets, and stats like this. Great follow on social media if you're a race fan. My takeaway from that is that it's not just my imagination that this has become more of a problem in recent years. And again, I think that's part of a larger cultural conversation that we've had in the sport many times over the last few years as well. But you see young drivers coming up through the ranks, and this is the reference point that they have. This is the recent history to them that is in their mind. And, they race very aggressively, and that's fine, but everything has a limit here. And the harder you race, the greater risk you run of going over that line, going over that limit, and forcing us to try these overtime. I mean, my goodness, here you talk about what we're at 12 already. I don't know off the top of my head exactly how many races we've run so far this year, but I imagine we're in the early 20s. I mean, that's practically half the schedule so far. Half the races have gone into overtime.
Yeah, this just proves. Yeah, it proves to you that if you give drivers a leash for any kind of, any more leeway, they're going to abuse the heck out of it. They're going to use all of it. And so, yeah, we're well on pace to break this record, Ben. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to set a record year. And I think I've heard Joshua Birch say this before when we've talked about overtime woes. When you get to the point in the race, if you're the one that causes the issue and the blame is on you, there should be some sort of, okay, end of the line. Like, do you want to police your drivers or not?
Well, Austin Dillon's still the winner of the Richmond race, so I think that answers your question there. He didn't get the playoff berth, but he was allowed to keep the win. So I mean, if you can get away with that these days, then I don't even know. I mean, incidental contact on an overtime, I don't know if there's any policing that. It was the 25th race of the year for Xfinity, by the way. So I forget now that we're in the middle of September. Watkins Glen's in the Cup Series playoffs. It's getting close to the Xfinity Series playoffs, but still, 12 out of 25 is as close to halfway as you can get without going over, right? So for all intents and purposes, basically half the NASCAR Xfinity races this year have gone into overtime. So,
and that's sickening to me. It's like, it's not there. You're just so like it's, and I'm sure this system was not intended. The overtime semantics were not intended to be used in this way, this often, this way. I'm sure when it was designed, they weren't thinking, oh boy, we're going to have this every race and it's going to be great. I think over time we've seen drivers become more accepting it as normal and overall just becoming more aggressive with the new rookie classes coming in. I think that might be more of the issue to look at.
Yeah. So we'll leave it there. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. I was going to follow up with something else there, but I think we've touched on this subject enough. Anyway, here.
Go follow Seth Eggert.
Yeah, go follow Seth.
Great guy.
And, yeah, I don't know.
It's kicking the tires and covers a lot of esports as well.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I don't know. Just I think that it's a situation here where the numbers don't lie, and I think it is getting substantially worse here. So again, I don't know how we fix. And this is what it was. Thinking about Saturday, what sparked it was Matt DiBenedetto having a car problem and having to stop in the bus stop chicane. It happens. Look, I mean, I'm not saying that, that of course we're not blaming Matt DiBenedetto for an issue on his car like that, but
you wouldn't penalize that incident.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there's no point because it's a car failure. He's out of the race anyway.
Your car died.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like, again, something has to change. I feel like I should be able to provide a better solution than I've maybe been able to. I've done my best. I have my thoughts and ideas, but I don't blame NASCAR here. I understand that, the fan base is divided. They want different things. And, I think there's merit to both sides of the argument, but at the same time, it shouldn't be taking us an hour to finish these races. We have TV windows. We have, fans that are attending the track that want to get on the road back home or back to their hotels or whatever. I don't know. I don't think it's sustainable to be doing this. Not that it happens every week, but it seems to be happening more frequently in recent years. I wish there were a way to try to curb it, and hopefully we can see that in the not too distant future.
Trends don't lie there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the race winner a little bit more, because he certainly deserves it. Connor Zilisch. And Brandon, I've often joked when we talk about prospects these days that they're the next Jeff Gordon, right? Because the next Jeff Gordon or the next Jimmy Johnson, I think that phrase has been thrown out. I mean, as early as Casey Atwood, right? They called Casey Atwood the next Jeff Gordon. That was a lot of pressure to put on him at the time. Ultimately, his career didn't pan out like many people expected it to. Although he did have some modest success, he certainly didn't come anywhere close to accomplishing what Jeff Gordon was able to accomplish in his career. But if you look at somebody like Connor Zilisch, who's absolutely dominated ARCA this year, we've said he's too good for ARCA on this show and on social media. I joked on Saturday that he might be too good for Xfinity because in his debut race here, he won pole, won the race, and we'll throw the ARCA results up here as well. This shouldn't be much of a surprise at all. He's won almost every ARCA race he's competed in his young career. Is Connor Zilisch perhaps actually the next Jeff Gordon? Can we justify that level of hype? Kobe Lambeth called him our Kimi Antonelli. Is that an apt comparison perhaps here when we look at the talent that Connor Zilisch has displayed already, just 18 years old?
I mean, there's one thing I know about him. He's got the road courses down. He's that art of racing. He is a certified natural. He's only 18. And he just won his debut Xfinity Series race at Watkins Glen. Doubled down with it with the ARCA win as well. I mean, plenty of more experience before that. Part of the team that won the 24 Hours of Daytona this year.
Yeah.
I mean, his resume is just building and building and building. And Jeff Gordon was sort of the same way. You know, he his family moved him from California to Indiana just so he could be in the sprint car world, and just a natural, a young phenom. All he needs left is a mustache. We'll get him working on that. There's certainly no keeping him from being the next Jeff Gordon, and we do throw that name out a lot, but actually, he's got a shot, and I don't think people would be upset with that coming true. I just hope with these newer young phenoms that are coming through, maybe we can get one that is not a villain. You know, maybe not as bold and brash, maybe a little more respect. So maybe to influence some of the other rookie classes coming in of, hey, we don't have to be a jerk to win championships. You know, maybe we can get someone like that.
Well, let me just roll through some of these results here. You mentioned Daytona, Brandon. Class wins in LMP2 in IMSA this year at Daytona and Sebring. So that's impressive enough right off the bat. In the ARCA Menards Series, he probably should have won at the Glen last year. Finished second in his ARCA debut with a broken sway bar, and only at the very last turn on the last lap did he get passed by Jesse Love. Since then, his ARCA results in 2024, first, second, first at the Glen this past weekend as well. In the ARCA Menards Series East, where he's on track to take the championship on Thursday night at Bristol, fourth, first, third, first, second through 7 races here. Just so many firsts, I'm almost losing track of how many times I'm saying it here. But he just has to go out. I mean, William Sawalich has been impressive as well, but he had a DNF at Dover earlier this season. So as long as Zilisch doesn't return the favor and have an issue of his own here this weekend at Bristol, he just has to survive. He'll be the ARCA East champion here in 2024. In his Truck Series debut, he sat on pole at Circuit of the Americas, was in contention to win that race again, kind of got shuffled up and down the field all day. Certainly a lot of chaos in that race, but still came home to finish 4th. And then here in the Xfinity Series this past weekend, taking the pole at the Glen, leading the most laps, winning the race despite all the chaos of the multiple overtime sessions here this past weekend. So you can't say enough about how impressive he has been almost every time he's gotten behind the wheel of a stock car this year. He did have the issue in a truck race, Richmond, that left him 29th, but that's an anomaly when you compare it to the rest of his results in ARCA and his debut performances on the road courses at COTA and Trucks and at the Glen and Xfinity. I think there's certainly reason to be very high on this kid in terms of his talent and potential, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in the Xfinity Series next year. And I hope that when he graduates from the ARCA level, and Williams Zilisch will do the same, hopefully we can get the ARCA Menards Series back to the point where it's not the 28 and 18 finishing 1-2 every weekend here. Because again, I think you look at these results, not much of a surprise seeing these two names up front here once again.
With the talent and the money floating around, someone's going to fill their shoes and do the exact same thing, I'm afraid.
Well, I don't know, man. I'd like to see the Rev cars and the Venturini cars up there again. I think they can do
I'd like to as well, but I mean, who else is in the pipeline that's going to come up?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. I hope Andres Perez can break through before the end of the year. He continue. I mean, again, almost feels like this is a winning class because, of course, the 28 and 18 are just in a whole nother different zip code here. Brandon Jones, of course, is an Xfinity Series regular. Perez looks like he's on his way to a championship. But again, we may not only have a winless champion in ARCA, we may not have a full-time winner at all. When you look at the top 8 or 9 of the standings, however many it is that have run every race this year. So again, it's a very interesting dynamic. It's going to be an interesting dynamic at the East finale at Bristol this week, given that it's, again, of course, a combo race with the main series. So we'll see here. Again, and it's frustrating, of course, because there are great stories in the ARCA Menards Series here, but it becomes a lot like what we've seen up until this season in Formula One with Max Verstappen and Red Bull. If it's this predictable, it's hard to get people to tune in, hard to create those storylines when it comes to who's sitting in victory lane. Obviously, on a weekend like this, it's just part of the grander storyline for Connor Zilisch. But yeah, again, it kind of does feel like the 28 and 18 series when you look at these results week in and week out.
And if I'm remembering right, didn't you interview Andres Perez at Sonoma this year? Was that one of your interviews?
It was not. I don't know.
Okay, my mistake.
There, but so I talked to Zilisch briefly during the press conference in Portland. Okay. But yeah, Sonoma was Perez wasn't at either of those races because those were the West Series here. And a good point from our own Kobe Lambeth as well here. Good to see you, Kobe. Keep an eye on.
I was about to say it, Kobe. Yeah, saw you talking about it earlier. I was about to.
That'll be another, certainly another driver to keep your eye on. If you haven't heard that name already, I think you're going to continue to hear it quite a bit over the next few years. And this upcoming weekend as well, we got the news. I think the 81 for the McAnally team, if I recall correctly, that's the truck that he's going to be driving here. So we'll keep an eye on that. And again, I think another driver that. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
He's going to be at Bristol, Kansas, Homestead, and Martinsville.
Yeah, so there you go. It's not just
ones
coming weekend. Multiple starts coming up here. He also got a chance to again the car that Connor Zilisch has been driving a lot this year, the Pinnacle number 28 car. He got the chance to make his ARCA debut at Salem. Unfortunately, had an accident and finished 15th. But again, certainly not indicative of the talent that he's shown working his way up through the ranks here. And now going to get to hopefully spotlight that on a more national scene here in the Truck Series. So great to get that news here this weekend, and we'll keep our eye on him as well as the season closes out here. But again, those 3 names here, I think we're seeing again, kind of maybe not a changing of the guard quite yet. I think the Kyle Larsons and Chase Elliott's of the world, certainly still have several more years in Cup where they're going to be a force to be reckoned with and competing for wins and championships. But this is, maybe you start looking at 2030, 2031. These are probably going to be the names that you see. Corey Day, Connor Zilisch, William Zilisch. Keep your eye on them because they've certainly proven quite a bit here at the ARCA level, despite the fact that their cars, I think, have certainly the teams that they have given them top-notch equipment as well. We saw it with Ty Gibbs when he was in the 18 car, but Ty, went out and won an Xfinity Series championship and backed it up there as well. I have no doubt that William Zilisch, if you give him a couple of years, can do the same. So, and we'll take you through the second page of the ARCA results here real quick, just to let the record show that. Unfortunate deal for Amber Balkan. That's going to be your last place finisher. Kind of a confusing situation once again for my last car.info readers. It was pretty clearly a did not start, yet Racing Reference still logged it as mechanical anyway. So I think for consistency purposes, we're going to make it an Amber Balkan article this week, but probably going to reevaluate how I'm doing things heading into 2025 because these inconsistencies are starting to get pretty frustrating. So we'll keep an eye on that for the future here as we continue to cover that part of the ARCA grid. In the meantime, let's move on now to Formula 2 at Baku, and want to talk a little bit about what we talked about last weekend with Jackson Lambros here in just a moment. But and sorry, Brandon, I noticed I skipped a couple questions. We'll come back to that in an open segment later. But let's talk about Baku since we got the results up here. Congratulations, Joshua Dirksen, on his first Formula 2 win. I believe also the first win for a driver from Paraguay in Formula 2 as well. So congrats to him and his fans from his country on that. The young American Jack Crawford in second. Great run as well for Gabriel Mini in P3 in the sprint race. And then over in the feature was Richard Verschoor, Victor Martins, and Kimi Antonelli rounding out the podium. Also of note, Gabriel Bortoleto, solid weekend for him. He takes over the points lead in Formula 2, so we'll keep an eye on how that championship continues to develop here over these final rounds. 2.5 month break until we get to Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Again, not a huge fan of how that F2 schedule is staggered here when it comes to this time of the year, but we got a long way to wait here, but certainly championship fight isn't over. Isaac Hadjar, not a good weekend for him, not picking up any points in that battle with Bortoleto and losing out on that championship lead. So going to be an interesting dynamic when we get back to racing, but again, quite a bit of a wait here before we do that. So we'll keep our eye on that. But Brandon, in the meantime, I do just want to follow up real quick because, again, we posted that clip from last week's show about our discussion about Franco Colapinto, since we do talk a lot of F2 on this show, and Colapinto getting the call up to replace Logan Sargent at Williams' seat, despite only being, I think, 6th at the time in the Formula 2 standings. But he is a part of the Williams Driver Academy. I think, again, like I said on last week's show, it wasn't so much a matter of, we thought of this guy negatively. It's just that we didn't think of him much at all because, F2 hasn't gotten as much attention here in the United States as F1 has during this boom period in the last half decade or so. So I think people were just unfamiliar with him and, just wanted to kind of have a wait and see sort of approach here, especially coming off of Monza, which is, even though 12th place was certainly a great run on debut, it's been a track where Williams has been better than average compared to where we expect them to be in the running order and results over the last several seasons here. But let's give Colapinto his flowers as well. Alex Albon P7, Colapinto P8. So already 4 points in the bag, double points for Williams this weekend. And again, as much as I hate to admit it as an American, and I certainly understand the emotions of the Argentinian fan base as well, because we were going through it with Logan Sargent the last couple of years. Of course, we wanted to see Logan do well, but I think Williams probably vindicated already at this point with how well Colapinto ran. And again, I think that, just if I could say anything to the fans that, were commenting on our video or thought that we were, being overly critical of Franco, I want to just make it clear, it's our job to look at these things through an objective lens. We still potentially, obviously being in America, we felt bad for Logan Sargent getting drops, but at some point we do have to be honest. And I think we were honest last week that, it was probably time for Williams to make a change for their own best interests and for evaluating one of their academy drivers. But again, Logan Sargent also finished 12th on his debut for Williams at Bahrain in 2023. I think a lot of people might forget that. So my only thing was, look, it was a great debut, but I just want to see, and I still want to see, because, as Jackson mentioned on wrap up last night, Williams is a team that seems to excel on tracks with these long straightaways. And I think Singapore is really going to be the true test for them, a much tighter, twistier street circuit. I want to see how Colapinto gets on there. And if he does, quite well, I don't expect a points finish this weekend because, quite frankly, I don't think the Williams car is going to be capable of that, even for Alex Albon. But, if he goes out, has a clean race and finishes, high enough to the point where he's punching above his weight, that's great. Nobody's sitting here rooting against Colapinto simply because he replaced Logan Sargent. I think that we all just want to look at him through an objective lens here. I think much of the American fan base still doesn't know very much about him. He certainly made his name known over these last couple of weeks here, his first 2 starts. But that's all it was here. We have to look at this through a reasonable and objective lens. And, I saw, again, one of the fans in our comment section last week was saying, you have to understand us Argentine fans are passionate and fired up, and we're so high on this kid that we expect him to win a race this year. We expect him to at least get a podium. And I couldn't help but sit back and just kind of chuckle because, you could put Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen or, you know, any Formula One legend behind the wheel of this year's Williams. I still think, the chances of them getting a podium, they might get you 2 or 3 tenths a lap, but
you could put Superman in a Williams and he's not making the podium.
It's just not feasible. Yeah. So I think, again, and it's difficult to come at this, given who the driver being replaced was, because we feel the same way too. We're all sports fans here at the end of the day. We all get passionate and fired up about it, but we also have to be reasonable and we have to look at things realistically. And I think that, Franco Colapinto has a certain set number of objectives that Williams is expecting him to hit. Obviously, Logan Sargent was unable to hit his. That's why he ultimately got dropped. But Franco's gone out and done a hell of a job, I think, these first 2 starts, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. So, again, I'm really looking forward to seeing a variety of tracks here for him as he finishes out the year. And I think his future is going to be very interesting because, we know Carlos Sainz is coming into that car next year. The 2025 grid looks like it's set for the most part. We still have a couple of questions, regarding the second AlphaTauri seat, I think, or AlphaTauri, my goodness. I still can't get used to the V-carb name. The second RB seat and the Kick Sauber seat as well. But hey, if he goes out and starts making these points finishes a regular thing, I don't know if there's room at the driver academy team that he's a part of right now with Williams. Obviously not on 25, but if you're a Sauber, do you look at this kid and think, hey, maybe he might be an option for our second seat next year, or whatever the case may be, if he continues to punch above his weight like this. So, that's really, I wanted to kind of draw it to a conclusion here. And, it got so much attention, so many comments that I felt like, we just had to come on here and address that really quickly. And again, fans are certainly entitled to their opinion. The only thing that we ask is that you keep it respectful and, not hurl personal insults our way, because we're certainly not going to do that to you all. That's the only thing that we ask. But, we welcome, all the passionate fans of this great sport that we love to comment your opinions, make your voices heard, and we'll engage in that discussion with you. But, let's just keep it civil, keep it respectful, and remember, at the end of the day, it's all just a game. It's all just sports, and it's not necessarily as serious as we think it is sometimes here. We all just want to enjoy the same thing here and enjoy each other's company and conversation.
Yeah, and for Baku, that was a fantastic drive for Colapinto. He really benefited off the contact with Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz there, brought out the safety car. But I mean that's one of the toughest. I think one of the toughest circuits you can go to. But I mean, it's tight as Monaco, but you can go a little bit faster in some areas. So it's very impressive. And yeah, I want to see him make his way out to places like Singapore, where you can get a little more speed as well. And we'll see what the different variety of tracks will hold. But yeah, certainly nothing against Colapinto. We want to see him do well, and it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm going to give it the Sheep Palpatine. We're going to watch his career with great interest.
Yeah. And again, one more thing, and then we'll move on here. But I also want to make clear, and I think Jackson made this clear last week as well. I don't think it was part of what we clipped here, but I think you saw it with Canapino and IndyCar this year. I think there are some bad apples in the Argentina fan base that unfortunately give them that kind of reputation. And we're certainly not saying that represents the fan base as a whole. There are great, passionate sports fans in Argentina, and we got a couple of comments from them as well this week. So it's certainly not trying to paint everybody in that kind of light here. I want to invite you all to engage with us and join the conversation. And and I'm not even saying you have to agree with us. I want people to disagree with us. I want us to be challenged in our viewpoints and perspectives, because I feel like that only strengthens our own arguments here. I welcome the disagreement. I welcome the discussion, but just keep it civil and respectful. That's the only thing that we're asking here. All right, one more comment from our friend Kobe here. For sure, got to keep one this time. I swear every time he wins, he gets disqualified. That's right. He did get to keep the win here, and good for him. I think he certainly momentum shift for him. Hopefully, again, we'll see if it lasts over this 2.5 month break that we have coming up here. But good result for him nonetheless, and we'll see if he can continue to ride that momentum here these last couple of rounds in the F2 season. All right, now before we move on, Brandon, let's go back. Got a little caught up in the transition from ARCA here, but I want to talk briefly about the driver that finished 7th this week here, Parker Kligerman. He announced on his Money Lap podcast this week that he is going to be stepping away from pursuing full-time opportunities in 2025 and beyond. He didn't use the R word, so to speak, didn't say he's retiring completely, never getting behind the wheel again. But this kind of caught me by surprise, Brandon, because he is still only in his mid-30s, and it seems like the last couple of years he's really found his groove with this big machine racing team. But the only thing they really haven't done is parking in victory lane yet. They've come very close on numerous occasions, and that's ultimately still the goal for him, I think, over these final few races here, is to get into victory lane and even still win a championship. They're in good position here for the playoffs starting in a couple of weeks. So how surprised were you by Parker Kligerman's announcement that he won't be full-time after this year?
Very much caught off guard, because Parker Kligerman does not strike me as someone who is anywhere near retirement age, or at least to be behind the wheel. Now, he did, kind of come back into form of going full-time, and has been kind of going back and forth, which you reminded me before the show how much AJ Allmendinger was once upon a time involved on the broadcast side of things. And I just did kind of remember that. But, he's been moving back and forth with that. But no, it really caught me off guard. I did not think that he would want to hang it up just completely after this year. It must be after a lot of thought, because, Parker, we know Parker's a really competitive guy behind the wheel. I mean, very much like AJ, very, very, very competitive, very hard on himself. So, yeah, he still has a shot to win the championship. Still has a shot to win for Scott Borchetta and Big Machine. So, but at the same time, it is nice to see that spot possibly be given to someone else who might need a seat in the Xfinity Series. That's a positive thing to look at for it. But he's still an impressive talent, especially on the road courses. So it did shock me that he's going to be leaving, and I don't really know a legitimate answer as to why he's going to do that, other than, hey, live life and be a broadcaster.
Yeah, well, I think he, and again, Brandon, I know you said you hadn't gotten to listen to the episode yet here, but I think what he said was it was during the West Coast swing, which, again, ironically, I was out there with the series for Portland and Sonoma. At some point, I think he was somewhere in the Bay Area getting ready for the Sonoma race, and just looking out at the view and just feeling really at peace with his career, and saying that he was satisfied with where he was at in life, and said that the ultimate goal was to make it to the Cup Series. And he did briefly get there with Swan Racing in 2014. But again, with a team like that, only lasted 8 races before they had to close their doors ultimately. Never really got that opportunity with a top team at the top level. And at this point in his career, I think he probably felt that the chances of that happening were much slimmer than they might have been 10 years ago when he got in that Swan car. So just took a couple of months to continue to think about it, and seemed to, really come to the conclusion that he was satisfied with his career. And, it reminds me of Carl Edwards stepping away. Obviously, Carl Edwards is somebody that got to the very top of NASCAR and competed for championships, never quite broke through. But after he lost that one in 2016, decided to step away. And people, I think, really caught off guard by that. But ultimately, I think, we forget sometimes just how draining this sport can be, how exhausting and how dangerous this sport can be. And, if you feel like, you're at a point in your life where you're content and satisfied with where you are,
you probably should get out.
I don't blame anybody for getting out of the car. I think it's, I'm going to miss seeing him behind the wheel. And again, he did leave the door open. He's not saying he's never going to, he's not pulling a Carl Edwards in that sense, never getting behind the wheel of a car again, at least not competitively.
He's going to be all around the racetrack, so he's going to get that bug sometime.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to see him doing more one-offs here. Would love to see him back in trucks. He's won a few races down there in that series.
He's only 2 years older than Daniel Suarez. He's only 34. And I know in sports, a lot of times we make the joke, like they'll say that a pitcher is 30, a miracle. that he's, even still athletic, but yeah, I mean, he's only 34, and which is what really surprised me. Like, I mean, a lot of the contemporaries that age are still, going at it. And so, but I mean, if he is at peace with it, then if this is the time, then we can't keep him from that.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, you want to talk about being in your 30s. AJ Allmendinger is in his early 40s. Denny Hamlin
Yeah.
is in his 40s. Kevin Harvick in his mid 40s. He just retired at the end of last year. So
I would argue that. Yeah, I would argue Denny Hamlin and Denny Hamlin and AJ Allmendinger are a different breed of human as well. I mean, as far as like training themselves to keep going at that age.
Yeah, sure, but again, I think there's something. I've heard it said that, Cup drivers often peak in terms of their prime at 37, 38, even 39 years old here. So there's something that, again, as experience continues to build, you just continue to get better, even into your late 30s, which is in most other, stick and ball sports when you really start to see most athletes drop off and decline. And of course, there are exceptions there as well, like Tom Brady playing into his mid 40s. You see LeBron James doing what he's doing, going to turn 40
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, another 40-year-old quarterback. So it's there are certainly exceptions to that rule, but it's certainly more common in stock car racing. And I do think if Parker wanted to, could probably have another 8 to 10 years if he was able to find those opportunities, where he could compete at a high level, certainly in the Xfinity Series. But again, if you're at that point in your career, and he certainly has something to fall back on. I know we were talking before we went live tonight, Brandon, as well. I've been very surprised at how active he's remained because, AJ Allmendinger, when he was doing TV work for NBC, when he got the call to go full-time with Colleague, really stepped away from all of that. I don't know in a couple of years if, he gets out of the car, if, NBC, of course, re-ups in this new TV deal, if he's going to go back to, if they're going to have a NASCAR America kind of studio show, if that's, something AJ might have a future career in later down the line, but he's not really doing very much of that, if anything, right now. But Parker Kligerman's still out there in the pits almost every week, and that's in addition to being a full-time Xfinity Series driver. And again, a lot of those races are on NBC. He's primarily competing in trucks with Henderson for the last several years, and those races being on Fox. I don't know if that made it a little bit easier, for him to be able to jump back and forth between the two. But he, like I said, it's not like he is going to get out of the car and just completely disappear like Carl Edwards did in many respects. He's still going to be very active in the sport. I hope he continues to do his podcast and build what he's trying to build over there with the Money Lap. And we're going to see him on TV. And I think we're still going to see him occasionally behind the wheel of a race car. Just won't be full-time competing for a championship. So we certainly wish him all the best, and be interesting to see who fills that seat next year as well. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. And again, Brandon, I know we're going to talk about this. I see we're coming up on an hour already, so we'll get to the Indy Next stuff here in just a moment. But you mentioned Sheldon Creed. I think what is this, 12 now runner-up finishes that he's up to, extending that record. So we'll see if he can close it out here. I got to tell you, Brandon, it's feeling a lot like Daniel Hemrick a few years ago. That same car for Joe Gibbs Racing, same sort of situation. All these second place finishes. Maybe he's going to win the championship on a last lap pass. We'll see.
I'm prepared to eat crow in November. He's not going to win a race. Let's go.
Because that worked out so well for you with Riley Herbst last year, didn't it?
It worked tremendously. I've got to tell you, tremendous.
All right. Keep a mental note of that for freezing cold takes here. if we get
Hello,
a
November win. Hello.
All right. And finally, tonight we'll move on here. The Indy Next season finale, the INDYCAR finale on NBC Sports. Lots of ends of an era here at the end of the 2024 season for American open wheel racing. But in a shocking turn of events, we haven't seen this at all this year. Who saw this coming? Louis Foster winning an Indy Next race here, closing out the season with victory at the Nashville Superspeedway in Indy Next. And again, Brandon, not too much more you can say about this. Obviously, he was the champion-elect, so to speak, coming into this race, but it's just a fantastic season from the IMS road course, race one of that doubleheader, starting in race two all the way to the end of the year. Never finished worse than second, won 8 times. What more can you say about the type of season that he had? And looking at the IndyCar grid next year, is there going to be a spot for him? Do you think he could find one of those seats, or is he going to have to, work his way part-time like the last couple of Indy NXT champions have?
I mean, I really hope he can. I mean, that's kind of the whole origin of the deal, isn't it? I mean, I know we've had problems with that in the past few years, but I mean, the deal is you win a championship, you're supposed to theoretically have a place to call home in IndyCar. Um, Certainly deserves it. Natural talent, Louis Foster. Yeah, don't know where he might end up there next year.
Yeah, it's not a new problem. It's an unfortunate problem that we've seen in Formula 2 as well. A lot of their champions having to sit out a year as a reserve driver or go race a year of Super Formula before they get the F1 call up, or what we've seen in Indy Next the last several years with guys like Linus Lundqvist, Christian Rasmussen. It's not necessarily been a guarantee that you're going to get that full-time seat. I would think we would at least get to see him at the Indy 500 next year. I feel like that's always been part of the scholarship deal, is you're supposed to be guaranteed at least a 500 and a handful of races. But I'm glad that we got this finale at Nashville on a relatively high-speed oval, because I think it just further solidified the talent that Louis Foster has here. Because again, save the Freedom 100, we still haven't seen that race come back, but at least we did get a nice sort of super speedway here, so to speak, to round out the Indy next season. And I think good for all these drivers to get that experience here. It's unfortunate for Jamie Chadwick and Miles Rowe and some of the others that you see on the back half of the result sheet here, but their races didn't go the way that they would have liked. But if the goal is ultimately IndyCar, the ultimate goal in IndyCar being the Indianapolis 500, you want to see these young drivers get an opportunity on some of the bigger ovals before they graduate to the top level. I'm glad that we got to see the Indy NXT drivers competed at Nashville this weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Not exactly a big oval. I mean, Nashville is funny because you look at the fairgrounds and also in Lebanon, they don't do perfect numbers. Like Nashville Superspeedway is 1.33 miles. Like just to be like being different for the sake of being different, and also being concrete, it just makes it such a different thing that you can't really compare with much else.
Yeah. But again, I think that's what these drivers need. They need to be outside of her. I mean, especially somebody like Chadwick, who, just coming into the ovals period last year, I think was a major culture shock for her. And I think she did take a step forward this year. Probably had a car that was capable of being in and around the top 5, and unfortunately contact took her out. So it's an unfortunate end to her season. We'll have more on her year as a whole on Women in Motorsports later this week. But I think for all these drivers, great to see them get this opportunity here at Nashville, and great for NBC Sports. One more time, we'll close out the show here with this tonight before we get into one shining moment. But Brandon, I don't know if you got to watch the end of the IndyCar broadcast. I know it's an unfortunate deal that it was conflicting with the Cup Series broadcast at Watkins Glen as well, the same family of networks. But Lee Diffie came back to narrate their final sign-off. This is the end of IndyCar's partnership with NBC Sports for now. We'll see how this next 2 years worth of a deal with Fox Sports goes. Everybody at NBC, I think, wishes Fox nothing but the best. We certainly hope to see them bring the same level of coverage and professionalism that we saw from what began as Versus and turned into NBCSN, and then later NBC, USA, Peacock, CNBC. I think even had a couple of races as well. Brandon, what are you going to remember most from the NBC Sports era of the IndyCar series?
There's so much, because really fondly with NBC Sports being with IndyCar because of the college program I was blessed to be a part of 5 years ago at IMS, and just kind of being around IMS Productions all month, their crew walking around everywhere, and NBC crew being around, and just having living through that experience for that month of Fernando Alonso's bump and all that stuff through the eyes of NBC, and having Lee Diffie, Townsend Bell, and Paul Tracy. That trio will stick in my mind very, very much so. And also, I can just remember, like, it was a couple of years ago that we got the announcement that NBC was going to have the full IndyCar calendar, and that it was crazy that, like, ESPN's not going to have an IndyCar race at all, like Alan Bestwick and all that crew. So that, and here we are in another season of transition. And then I also look over at the Xfinity side. We're not CW starts next weekend, so that's another chapter of NBC sports and motorsports that's closing for now. Got to remember the professionalism really on the IndyCar side, especially. I think they took that very seriously and were able to keep it as a motorsport and less of a Friday night brawl entertainment thing. Really had kept the conversation around the broadcast. It wasn't hokey, it wasn't corny. Sometimes, but I think they mainly, when appropriate, they kept the story about the race, and I hope Fox continues to do that. Actually, I really hope Fox continues to do that because other sides of things that they currently do would prove to me otherwise. But I hope there's a completely different group around it. I hope they keep IMS Productions a part of what they're doing with Fox. And if that's the case, I think we're in for a different taste of IndyCar, but hopefully going to keep the professionalism at the forefront.
Well, I am cautiously optimistic because I think a lot of people, again, they're having PTSD moments from the NASCAR memories that they have of Fox over the last decade or so, and fearing the same for IndyCar. Regardless, I would say wait and see. But I think that, Brandon, to your point about IMS Productions, I think that they're still going to be very heavily involved here. And again, I don't know that there's going to be as much overlap as people might think here, because again, I try to be equally as critical of the networks when I see it fit here. I also try to give them their flowers when they deserve it as well. And NBC certainly did a great job for many years here. But I think that IndyCar's or NBC's coverage of IndyCar, I think, has been a level above even their NASCAR coverage. I think they've done a tremendous job over the last several years, particularly when they were in friendly competition with ESPN, ABC. And I still remember that last race in Detroit that Ryan Hunter-Reay won after Alexander Rossi, his then teammate at the time, locked his wheels up in the closing laps. And Alan Bestwick is an absolute pro, and I do think Goodyear and Cheever caught a little bit too much flack in the closing years of that run. I think they deserve a lot of credit for the job they did in the booth over the years. But I mean, Bestwick just really signed off and thanked everybody for such a great run for about 20 seconds, and that was it. NBC went out of their way to put that montage together and have Lee Diffie come back. Very fitting, I think, that he got to close it out, even though he stepped away over to the NASCAR booth at the end of this year. So again, I think a little bit of a messy situation with the transition to Kevin Lee, and not that Kevin Lee did a bad job or anything, but I think maybe kind of threw some IndyCar fans for a loop there. And then unfortunate that they had the schedule conflicts this weekend, but that shouldn't sour the entire 16-year run that they had when they came in as Versus in 2009. Some great people working on those broadcasts and a great team that we're certainly going to miss. Fox, again, like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic, but they do have very big shoes to fill taking over for NBC Sports. So we'll look forward to that next year. Hopefully they do a good job.
Some final thoughts about it. Lee Diffie saying, "Let's go." Lee Diffie saying, "It's time to bring the action." The whole trio there, Paul Tracy, Townsend Bell, and Lee Diffie going, "Whoa!" after anything happening. And then also Townsend Bell or PT saying the danger zone. That sticks with me almost every other day.
Yeah, and I think it is going to be interesting. I would not count out perhaps Townsend and Hinch as well, maybe following the series over to Fox Sports. I mean, I don't know what else they would be contractually bound to do over at NBC Sports here. So, we saw it with Steve Matchett and David Hobbs when the F1 rights moved from Speed to NBC in 2013. They just followed, as did Lee Diffie, actually, ironically enough, now that I think about it. That was when he came over to NBC Sports. So I think not entirely out of the question that we could see, and even Kevin Lee, I feel like can be quite the freelancer at times. We'll see who they put together in that booth next year. But again, everybody, from the booth to the production behind the scenes, a lot of big shoes to fill over that NBC Sports team is leaving Fox next year in 2025. So again, we'll have to wait and see how it goes.
And I got to give praise for Kevin Lee. I mean, just to be put in that position, he did an excellent job with the rest of the year. Whatever critics may say about him, and he's way too intelligent of a journalist to leave behind in this deal. So I hope he does find a proper place.
Yeah, and he had done it plenty of times before, because there was a time where
Yeah.
Lee Diffie was also the F1 play-by-play guy, and so he certainly had to fill in for weeks where they conflicted there, and other times where Lee wasn't available. So again, yeah, another total pro. Hopefully he lands somewhere and comes out of his deal on the other side. But again, thank you so much, NBC Sports, for a great run, and thank you all for watching our show tonight. Before we let everybody go here, Brandon, what's your one shining moment from this past weekend at the Glen, at Baku, at Nashville? Take your pick.
Oh man. Well, I guess I'll give it to Alex Palou. Congratulations on being a three-time champion, and also congratulations to Nashville Superspeedway for putting on an IndyCar championship. I think it was uh, well attended for those standards. I think it had pretty good turnout. Um, Thank you, Nashville Superspeedway, for painting the walls white for IndyCar's return instead of the blue from the Ally 400. It was sort of in the inside of the safer barriers if you look carefully enough, but I think they did a good job on treating IndyCar with respect and sprucing up the place for a proper championship setting. And glad it was on an oval. I actually do miss the street circuit. Hope when the Titans finally finish their new Nissan Stadium, we can get it back and try this reconfiguration on Broadway. But Alex Palou, congratulations on being a three-time champ. You're in an elite group there.
It's certainly a good pick, Alex Palou. Again, much like the guy I'm about to talk about, I think, and certainly a few years ahead in his career, but shaping up to be one of the all-time greats, already a three-time champion, 3 in the last 4 years. You can't say enough about his consistency and his dominance. I think, like the guys talked about on wrap up last night, potentially the word dynasty could start to be thrown out there with what he's done with Chip Ganassi's team. And I think proving why McLaren and Zach Brown wanted him so badly, maybe not even for IndyCar, but for a potential F1 sort of deal there as well. So we'll see what the future holds for Alex Palou, but I'm sure he's going to continue to win many more races and perhaps even more championships in the years to come if he continues this stretch that he's on. And maybe you'll be able to say the same in a few years about Connor Zilisch. Again, you can't say enough about coming into the Xfinity Series, taking pole position, leading the most laps, winning the race on his debut. And in a stacked field that includes drivers who have been racing road courses longer than he's even been alive. Connor Zilisch, I think, is going to be a future superstar if he can continue on the trajectory that he's on. And I really look forward to seeing what he can do full time next year. So congratulations to him again for what he did at Glen this weekend, winning not just in Xfinity, but once again in ARCA. Seems to be on the trajectory to claim the ARCA East Championship in a few nights at Bristol. So we'll keep our eye on that here as well. And again, we'll bring you coverage of all that on next week's Encore show. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching us here tonight. And make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, and most importantly, right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all for the continued support and helping our numbers continue to go up this year. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show to consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in helping us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet here at the Grid Network and keeping us on the air throughout 2024 and into 2025, potentially expanding our on-site coverage for you guys next year. If that's what you want to see, if you liked what you saw tonight, you want to see more of that in the future, this is a way that you can continue to support our work. Or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution to us instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. Or if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the Super Chat and Super Thanks features enabled as well. Now, looking ahead at our upcoming schedule this week, Kobe Lambeth will be back with Josh Birch and Matt White this coming Wednesday on Grid Tonight, so stay tuned for that here in a little less than 48 hours' time. Women in Motorsports will be back this week as well. We took the week off last week with not too much to talk about, but we'll talk more about Tony Breidinger, an interesting situation there in the ARCA race with our crew chief serving as her relief driver, so coverage from the ARCA series and also recap of Jamie Chadwick's season and looking ahead to F1 Academy coming up this weekend as well. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, more Grid Live coverage this upcoming weekend as always. And then we'll see you back here next Monday for another episode of Encore. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off here for this evening?
Just in from the delivery room. It's Bristol, baby. Second race of Tennessee's calendar. Well, third race of Tennessee's calendar. on the in the Cup Series if you count the spring. If it's anything like the spring, we're in for a fun night for a cutoff for the Cup Series, and also the regular season finale for Xfinity. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm very interested to see how Denny Hamlin is going to approach this race here. It has not been the start to the playoffs that he would have wanted at all. He's had 2 very poor results. He currently sits 13th, right on the cut line, or right below the cut line, I guess I should say. He is the cut line right now with him and whoever's in 12th place. I think it's Ty Gibbs, actually, his teammate, so that's an even more interesting dynamic there. But how he approaches this race, how Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex Jr., a couple of Cup champions who haven't had such great results so far, how they approach this race, it's going to be very interesting to watch. So make sure you tune in here this weekend to the Bristol night race. Another race where, hey, I wouldn't mind if it goes into overtime. There's no numbers to worry about. So we'll leave you there.
Well, Denny Hamlin, Denny Hamlin certainly is my biggest storyline going into that. And if he makes it through this somehow, he better race his butt off every race after that until Phoenix. And don't hold back at all. Yeah. Maybe you've learned your lesson after that.
All right, we'll leave it there. For Brandon Crossland, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next week to recap Bristol and all sorts of other stuff right here on Grid Encore. So we'll see you then.